You know that feeling when your stomach sinks, not from fear, but from betrayal? That was me, frozen in the middle of a bustling café, a tablet in my hand, staring at a business pitch on a viral startup blog. The logo. The product. The tagline. All mine. Except the name below it wasn't. It was my sister's. My name is Rena Calloway, and I'm the founder of a now successful wellness tech brand. But more importantly, I'm the sister who learned the hard way that blood isn't thicker than greed. If you think this is just another petty sibling rivalry, sit tight, I promise you, it's anything but, because in that moment, staring at her face smiling through the screen, I realized this wasn't just theft, it was war. I'd always been the quieter one between us. My older sister, Kira, was the star valedictorian, voted most likely to succeed, and the type who knew how to charm a room with ease. Me? I was the girl who doodled designs in the margins of notebooks, obsessed over packaging colors, and spent hours researching smart materials. For years, I'd been developing a business idea rooted in wearable tech that promoted mental wellness. A discreet, elegant bracelet that gently vibrated and heated in specific intervals to guide users through breathing exercises during stress spikes. I called it Calmai, a blend of calm and me. I never thought the one person I confided in would turn that trust into a weapon. I worked 2 jobs and lived in a cramped studio apartment while I refined the prototype. I had no connections, no angel investors, just stubborn determination. And I told no one, except Kira. She was my sister, after all. She'd always encouraged me with an offhand, "You're so creative, Ren." I thought that meant something. One weekend, I visited her place. She offered me wine and nodded politely as I walked her through Calmai, showing her a rendering on my tablet and explaining the tech behind it. She wasn't overly enthusiastic, but I chalked it up to her being more finance-minded than tech-savvy. What I didn't know then was that she wasn't just listening, she was preparing her move. A few weeks later, I filed my provisional patent. It wasn't cheap, but it was essential. I had a friend from college who worked in IP law and guided me through the paperwork. I didn't even tell Kira I had filed it, I just felt safer that way. It felt like a small victory. Protection for my dream. Security for the years I'd poured into something that finally felt tangible, but that silence would become my greatest advantage. Months went by. I was still refining my pitch deck and preparing for my first small round of seed funding. Then, one morning, I got a ping from my old college roommate. "Maya, did you launch something? Look at this." She sent me a link to a popular startup blog. The article was titled, "Next Gen Wellness Tech, the Bracelet Revolutionizing Mindfulness." My stomach dropped. It was Calmai. My design. My concept. My language. Except the name was now Breathe Sync. And the founder? Kira Calloway. I clicked the interview video attached. There she was, explaining how she had the idea on a retreat in Bali. I knew then, I had been stabbed in the front. I watched the video again and again. My hands shook with rage, but my mind stayed clear. I called my lawyer. I didn't confront her. Not yet, because while Kira thought she'd pulled off the heist of the century, she didn't realize I had a signed, sealed, and time-stamped patent application with my name on it, filed months before she launched anything. And if there's one thing stronger than betrayal, it's evidence. Kira launched her Kickstarter 2 weeks later. It went viral. Celebrities tweeted about it. Influencers wore Breathe Sync bracelets in their wellness reels. Orders rolled in. Investors circled. And me? I watched. Then came my moment. A tech blogger posted a video breakdown of the product's internal design. He opened up the bracelet, mapped its hardware, even linked to its schematic. It matched mine, line for line. The trap was set. And now it was time to spring it. With my lawyer's help, I sent a cease and desist to her holding company. We attached the original patent filing, detailed diagrams, timestamps from my digital workspace, even emails where I had described the idea to Kira. Within a week, the blog updated their article, pending legal dispute over IP ownership. But what really hit her wasn't the article. It was what came next. The investors, spooked, backed out. The Kickstarter was suspended. Customers started asking questions. Kira's PR team went silent, then I got the call, her voice was brittle. Run. I think there's been a misunderstanding. She claimed it was all a coincidence, that she'd been inspired by our conversations, and that she didn't realize I had protected the idea. I told her plainly, I had the patent. I had the proof. I wasn't backing down, her silence was. The first honest moment we'd had in years, the legal battle dragged for weeks. Her team tried to negotiate a settlement. Money. Credit. Licensing. I turned it all down. Instead, I demanded the full transfer, trademark, assets, manufacturer relationships, and public acknowledgement, and I got it. Kira was forced to issue a statement retracting her claim of authorship. Everything BreatheSync had built, on top of my foundation, was now legally mine, and I had one more decision to make. 3 months later, I rebranded the product as BreatheSync by CalMyTech. Sleeker design. Improved app. Transparent messaging. Founder's note, now published on the site, read: a true innovation is rooted in honesty. This product was created from years of quiet work and a belief that real wellness starts with integrity. Sales soared. Industry press picked it up. I secured partnerships Kira could only have dreamed of, and I did it without stealing a thing. People often ask if I regret telling her about CalMay. If I'd go back and change it all, that I wouldn't, because what Kira handed me, without even realizing, was validation. Proof that I had created something so good, so original, it was worth stealing. It taught me to trust my instincts, to back up my work, and to never mistake family for loyalty. In the end, she stole an idea, but I owned the legacy. The months that followed the rebrand, I found myself receiving messages from people all over the world. Some were users who said BreatheSync had helped them through panic attacks, insomnia, or even the unbearable grief of losing someone. Others were aspiring founders, mostly women, thanking me for sharing my story so openly. It caught me off guard. At first, I'd been so wrapped up in legal filings, business deals, and re-engineering that I hadn't realized how loud my silence had been. I had gone from being invisible to seen, and as much as Kira tried to erase my place in the story, she had inadvertently handed me a microphone instead. 6 months after the full launch under CalMyTech, I was invited to speak at the Global Wellness Tech Conference in Berlin. The keynote slot, something Kira had once said was reserved for legacy names. I stood on that stage in a sharp navy blazer, looking out at a room of innovators, investors, and thought leaders. I shared how the product had come to life. I didn't mention Kira by name. I didn't have to. The silence spoke louder than accusation. The applause after my talk wasn't just for the tech. It was for the resilience. For the quiet architect who built something real and stood her ground when someone tried to claim it, and yet, I still hadn't answered the one question that kept circling in my own mind. Forgiveness is a strange concept. People love to romanticize it, as if it's a simple flip of a switch. But what do you do when the betrayal came from someone who knew every part of your heart and still chose to slice it? I kept trying to rationalize it. Maybe she thought I'd never get it off the ground. Maybe she thought she was doing me a favor by taking it to market. But the truth is, she didn't believe in me. She saw me as a resource, not a person. I thought about writing her a letter. Maybe not to forgive, but to release myself from the weight of it. I never did. Some stories don't get redemption arcs. Some just ends. The company scaled. I focused less on what I had lost and more on what I was building. I hired young engineers and designers, many of them from underrepresented communities, and I created an internal policy: no idea leaves the room undocumented. We built a culture that protected creativity, not just legally, but emotionally. I became the mentor I once needed. And in doing so, I healed parts of myself I didn't even know were fractured. Kira had stolen a blueprint, but she couldn't replicate the soul of it. And that's what made the difference in the end. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, nearly a year to the day after the lawsuit ended, I received a package at the office. No return address. Inside was a small, black velvet box. I opened it slowly. Nestled inside was the original prototype bracelet I'd shown Kira in her apartment that night. The one I thought I had lost. There was no note. Just the bracelet. Scuffed, old, and still humming faintly from a charge it probably hadn't received in a year. For a second, I wanted to throw it away. But I didn't. I placed it on the shelf above my desk. A reminder that even in betrayal, there are pieces of the past worth preserving. Holding that prototype in my hand was like cracking open a time capsule. My fingers traced the worn edges, remembering the hours I'd poured into its creation. It was crude, nothing like the sleek bands we'd now mass-produced, but it held everything: my vision, my hopes, and my first attempt to build something from scratch. I didn't know. But it didn't matter. Because, for once, I wasn't waiting for her to explain herself. A part of me wanted to call her, to demand answers, closure, maybe even an apology, but I didn't. Instead, I placed the bracelet on my shelf in a clear acrylic box. Not as a shrine, but as a boundary. A reminder that some ghosts don't need to be banished, they just need to be contained. Forgiveness isn't always about rebuilding a relationship. Sometimes it's simply about setting the hurt down and walking forward without it. I'd spent too long carrying the weight of what Kira did. It was time to stop giving her space in my head and my heart. That fall, we hit our first 1 million downloads. The team threw a rooftop party at our office building downtown. String lights blinked overhead. Jazz flowed from a live band. I looked around at the team I'd built, a diverse, brilliant, full of fire, and I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. I raised my glass to toast them. I thought of Kira. Not with bitterness, but with clarity. She wasn't here. Not because I'd cut her out, but because she had cut herself out. She chose the shortcut, and it cost her the journey, and I'd taken the long road, the bruised road, and found everything she'd been chasing. Months later, I was invited to guest lecture at the same university where Kira and I once sat in the back row of entrepreneurship class, doodling logos in the margins of our notebooks. Walking onto that campus again stirred something in me. I half expected to see her waiting by the old coffee cart, waving with a crooked grin, but she wasn't there. Of course she wasn't. I stepped into the lecture hall, and 40 bright-eyed students looked up at me, waiting, and I told them my story. Every part. Even the ugly bits, because I wanted them to know, you can recover from betrayal. You can protect your vision. And yes, success is sweeter when you know you earned every single step. Months later, I was invited to guest lecture at the same university where Kira and I once sat in the back row of our entrepreneurship class, scribbling wild startup ideas on napkins and half paying attention to the professor. Back then, everything felt possible and unbreakable. Walking those familiar halls stirred something bittersweet in me. Not grief, exactly. More like the feeling you get when visiting a childhood home that now belongs to someone else. You see the shapes of your memories, but realize they no longer belong to the present. The lecture hall was smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I'd just grown. 40 students looked up at me, notebooks ready, laptops open, eyes wide with expectation. I set my notes down, paused, and simply began. I'm not here to sell you a fairy tale. I'm here to tell you how I almost lost everything, not to failure, but to someone I trusted. I walked them through the origin of my idea. The app. The partnership. The betrayal. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't throw Kira under the bus. But I didn't protect her either. Because the truth didn't need polishing. When I finished, one girl in the front row raised her hand. She asked, if you had known Kira would do what she did, would you still have told her about the idea? I paused, really thinking, then I said, yes. Because protecting your ideas doesn't mean hiding them. It means securing them, and knowing their value, even when someone else tries to rewrite the ending. The room was silent for a heartbeat. Then came the applause, not loud, not dramatic, but real, and in that moment, I felt a chapter close, not with fury or vengeance, but with clarity. The company kept growing. We launched a second product, Sleep Ease, a smart wearable focused on circadian rhythm alignment, and the reception was better than I expected. Investors came knocking, but this time, I set the terms. I wasn't just running a company. I was creating a culture. One where ideas were protected, voices amplified, and betrayal wasn't seen as a natural cost of ambition. Though I mentored young founders, especially women, teaching them not just about product development and branding, but about contracts, NDAs, intellectual property, and gut instinct. The things too many people skip when they're blinded by excitement. Kira's absence remained like a space where a picture once hung. But I stopped resenting it. In fact, I began to see it for what it was, space for something new. One day, during a panel event in San Francisco, a young man approached me after my talk. "You're the one from that patent case, right? The mindfulness tech story," he asked. I smiled, not because I wanted to relive it, but because I was no longer ashamed of it. "Yes," I said, "I'm her." He looked at me with quiet admiration. "You didn't just win the lawsuit. You won your name back." And in that moment, I realized something that took me years to understand. I didn't build this company in spite of what happened. I built it because I refused to be erased. Epilogue. The quiet patent. Every now and then, I revisit the patent filing. It's framed now, hanging in my home office where the first prototype was born. The original name, the sketches, the filing date, every detail is a reminder of the girl who once dared to believe she could change something, even when the world didn't see her yet. Kira never tried to contact me again, but I sometimes wonder if she watches from a distance, seeing the press releases, the product launches, the TED Talk I finally gave, and maybe she tells herself it was always mine. Or maybe she still believes it should have been hers. Either way, the record is clear. The blueprint bears my name. She stole my idea once. But she didn't know I had already secured the foundation, and that, in the end, was the difference between her shortcut and my legacy.